The Galactic Academy of Varelion Prime was one of the most advanced schools in the universe. Students from hundreds of worlds came to study there, beings of crystal, gas, light, and even pure energy. Each of them carried the pride of their planet, their technology, and their brilliance. And then there was Ethan, a simple human boy, sitting quietly at the back of the class. He wore an old brown jacket, his hair always a little messy, his hands stained with ink. While everyone else used digital holopads and neural links, Ethan still wrote with a pen on paper, something no one had seen in years. The other students often looked at him with confusion or pity. To them he was strange and maybe even a little backward. Humans were not considered powerful or special anymore. The galaxy had moved far ahead while Earth had fallen silent long ago. Among his classmates was Zira, a tall silver-skinned girl from the noble Varelian race. Her people were proud, elegant, and known for their intelligence. Zyra was one of the best students in the academy, confident, graceful, and admired by everyone. But she also had a sharp tongue, especially when it came to Ethan. She never missed a chance to tease him. "Still using paper, human?" she said one morning, laughing softly as his pen scratched across the page. "What century are you living in?" Ethan only smiled and replied calmly, "It helps me think." Zyra raised her silver eyebrows. "Think? We think through neural data streams and mind links. That thing you're using is just a dead tree." He chuckled quietly, not offended, and said, "Maybe, but sometimes old things still work." The class laughed. Even the teacher, a floating sphere of blue light, seemed amused. But Ethan didn't react. He just kept writing as if her words didn't touch him. To Zyra, that calmness was irritating. She wanted to see him get angry, to break a little, to show weakness, but he never did. He was always polite, always quiet, and that made her wonder if he was simply too timid, or too proud to care. One day, during a lecture about ancient civilizations, the professor displayed holograms of old planets that had fallen to ruin. Among them was Earth, dry, cracked, and broken. Humanity, the professor said, was once brave but reckless. They destroyed their own world. "A pity," the class murmured in agreement. Zyra glanced at Ethan, expecting him to look sad or embarrassed, but he didn't. He stared at the image of his ruined planet with quiet eyes, not of shame, but of something else. Something deeper. When class ended, Zyra walked beside him and said mockingly, "Doesn't it hurt to see what your people did? To know your home is gone?" Ethan turned to her with a soft smile. "It hurts, yes," he said. "But that's also why I'm here, to learn, to rebuild what was lost, to make sure Earth isn't just a forgotten picture in some classroom." His words stopped her for a moment. There was no anger, no defense, just truth. She didn't know why, but his calmness made her uncomfortable. It felt like there was more behind his eyes than she could understand. After that, Zyra started watching him more closely. He spent long hours in the library studying alone, often reading ancient human texts that most considered useless. When other students laughed at him, he only smiled and said nothing. He didn't try to prove them wrong. He just kept moving forward, one quiet step at a time. To Zyra, he was still strange, still an outsider. But deep inside, a small part of her began to wonder, who was this human who carried so much silence, yet seemed to shine with something invisible? She didn't know it yet, but soon she would find out that the boy she mocked was not just a human student. He was the last echo of a world that refused to die. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's presence in the academy became a quiet joke among the students. Wherever he went, whispers followed. His old-fashioned ways, his human curiosity, and his strange manner of learning made him stand out, and not in a good way. Zyra often led those jokes. She didn't mean to be cruel, but there was pride in her heart. Pride that came from being Varelian, one of the galaxy's most advanced races. She couldn't understand why a species from a ruined planet was allowed to study beside her. During one engineering simulation, the class was tasked with building a miniature reactor. Everyone used advanced quantum tools, but Ethan, as always, worked differently. He used physical wires, small printed circuits, and actual manual control boards. When the test began, his reactor sputtered, hissed, and suddenly went dark. A puff of smoke rose into the air. Laughter filled the room. "Look, the human's toy broke again," one of the reptilian students shouted. Zyra crossed her arms, smiling sharply. "Maybe humans should stick to burning wood for power." The whole class laughed louder, but Ethan didn't. He simply turned off the small device, cleaned the table, and said in a calm voice, "We started with fire, and from that we reached the stars." The laughter slowly faded. No one knew how to answer that. His words were quiet, but they carried weight, a kind of strength that didn't come from pride, but from memory. Later that day, as Zira walked through the glass corridors of the academy, she saw Ethan again, sitting alone in the garden dome under the artificial sunlight. He had his small paper notebook open and was sketching something. Curiosity got the better of her. "Still drawing?" she asked, half teasing. He looked up with a small smile. "Yes, it helps me think." She sat beside him, pretending not to care. "You humans do everything the hard way." He nodded softly. "Maybe. But that's how we learn." For a brief moment she looked at his drawing. It was the Earth, blue and green, surrounded by stars. The image was simple but full of life. "Why keep drawing your dead world?" she asked. "It's gone." Ethan's eyes softened. "Because it's still home," he said. "And maybe one day it won't be dead anymore." Zira didn't reply. She looked away, pretending she wasn't touched by his words. But deep inside, something shifted. There was something strange about humans, something stubborn, something that refused to fade even when everything was lost. The next week, the Academy held a debate about ancient species and their survival instincts. Zira volunteered, confident as always. Ethan's name appeared beside hers on the participant list. When he stepped on stage, the audience chuckled. A human debating against a Varelian prodigy? It was almost a joke. Zira spoke first, her voice smooth and elegant. "Progress," she said, "is about perfection. The weak are left behind so that the strong may thrive." The crowd nodded in approval. Then it was Ethan's turn. He spoke slowly, but every word carried emotion. "Perfection," he said, "isn't what keeps a species alive. Survival is about mistakes, and learning from them. We humans made more mistakes than anyone else, but every time we fell, we stood back up." The room fell silent. He continued, voice trembling slightly. "Maybe that's what makes us human. Not strength, not power, just the will to keep trying, even when there's no reason left to." Even Zira couldn't look away. For the first time, she saw not a primitive boy, but someone who carried something deep, something that couldn't be measured by intelligence or technology. When the debate ended, Ethan didn't win officially. But no one laughed this time. As he left the stage, Zira watched him in silence. For the first time, she wondered if the galaxy had been wrong. Maybe humans weren't weak at all. Maybe they were the strongest of all. Because they never gave up. The Galactic Academy's grand hall buzzed with excitement. The professor had just announced a new assignment, a group project that would count for half the semester's grade. "Your topic," said Professor Relna, her glowing eyes scanning the room, "is Origins of Galactic Civilizations. You will research how each species began, how they struggled, and how they survived." The students murmured in excitement until the teams were announced. Zira's confident smile faded the moment she heard her name. Team 3, Zira Varelian, Ethan Hale, and the Trixon twins. Her silver eyes widened in disbelief. "With him?" she muttered under her breath. Ethan, sitting quietly at the back, only gave a polite nod. "Looks like we're partners." Zira sighed loudly. "Just don't slow me down." Ethan smiled gently. "I'll try not to." Over the next few days, they worked in the study hall. Zira focused on the presentation design, bright visuals, advanced data charts, and glowing holograms. The Trixon twins gathered galactic statistics. Ethan, as usual, sat with his notebook reading through old digital archives. He didn't talk much, but whenever someone got stuck, he quietly helped. When Zira's data map malfunctioned, Ethan reconnected the system manually, something no one else even knew how to do. "How did you fix that?" Zira asked, genuinely surprised. He shrugged. "I used to repair things back home. We didn't always have working machines." She stared at him for a moment. For the first time, she noticed the small scars on his hands, the marks of someone who had lived a rough life, not one of comfort. When the day of presentation arrived, the class gathered in the hollow chamber. The lights dimmed as Team 3 stepped forward. Zira began with her usual confidence, introducing the topic. Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood before the crowd holding a small paper note, not a glowing tablet, not a data stream, Just paper. Our project, he began softly, is about survival. Every great civilization started with fear. Fear of the dark, fear of hunger, fear of death. But fear made them learn, made them grow. A quiet murmur passed through the room. No one expected such words from the quiet human. Ethan continued, his voice steady and full of emotion. My people, humans, came from a small blue world. We had no claws, no shells, no armor, only dreams. And those dreams carried us to the stars. Zira, standing beside him, felt something stir inside her chest. His words weren't grand, but they felt real, like they came from somewhere deep within. He pointed at an image of old Earth cities, ruined and empty. We made mistakes. We destroyed what we loved. But still we learned to stand again. Maybe that's what we're best at, standing back up. When the lights came back on, the room was silent. No one laughed, no one mocked. Even the professor's glowing eyes seemed dimmed with respect. Zira couldn't find her voice. She looked at Ethan, the boy she once called weak, and saw something different. Not weakness, not pride, but spirit. After class, she walked beside him, her voice softer than ever. That speech, where did you learn to speak like that? Ethan smiled faintly. It wasn't a speech. It's just what I remember. What you remember, she asked quietly. He looked up at the stars visible through the academy's glass ceiling. My father used to tell me stories of old Earth, about how humans never stopped trying even when everything was falling apart. Zira didn't reply. She just walked in silence, her heart strangely heavy. For the first time, she began to feel something she had never felt toward the human. Not mockery, not pity, but respect. She still didn't fully understand him, but she could sense there was something deeper behind his calm eyes. A story, maybe even a pain that he never spoke of. And deep inside, she knew this was just the beginning. The strange human she once laughed at was about to change her view of the galaxy forever. The day started calm. The skies above Virelian Prime glowed with soft golden light from the twin suns. Students filled the academy halls, laughing and chatting, unaware that something terrible was coming. Zira was in the laboratory tower, working on a project alone. Outside, faint lightning flashes rippled through the atmosphere. The air felt strange, heavy, and tense. The academy's energy fields flickered once, then again. A robotic voice echoed through the speakers. Warning. Magnetic storm detected. All students returned to safety zones immediately. Zira frowned. She wasn't worried. Virelian Prime had weather control systems. No storm could truly harm them. She continued working, ignoring the growing noise outside. But within minutes, the lights began to dim. The walls vibrated. The air grew hot. Then, without warning, a massive explosion shook the tower. The emergency lights flickered red. The door to the lab jammed, sealing her inside. System failure, the voice repeated. Atmospheric breach detected. Panic filled Zira's chest. The control panel sparked wildly. Smoke spread across the room. She ran to the door, trying to force it open but it wouldn't move. The toxic gas sensors flashed red. She coughed, her eyes burning. Help, somebody! Her voice broke as the smoke thickened. She dropped to her knees, feeling dizzy. Her energy shield flickered weakly. Fear she had never known before gripped her heart. Then she heard it, footsteps pounding through the corridor. A voice shouted through the smoke, Zira, are you there? It was Ethan. Her heart jumped. Ethan, I'm trapped! The door, it won't open. Stand back, he shouted. With a loud crash, Ethan kicked the side panel off and began pulling at the manual release. The smoke stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. Sparks burned his skin as he forced the mechanism open. Finally, with a metallic scream, the door slid halfway. He crawled inside, coughing hard. His face was covered with soot, his jacket torn. He wrapped a cloth around Zira's mouth and handed her his cracked oxygen mask. Here, use this, he said. But what about you? She asked, her voice trembling. He gave her a small, tired smile. I've breathed worse back home. Before she could argue, he pulled her toward the door. They moved low under the smoke, crawling through the burning corridor. The lights were gone, replaced by the red glow of emergency signs. The building trembled around them. Keep moving, he shouted. Zira stumbled, her strength fading. Her energy shield failed completely, leaving her exposed to the heat. Ethan didn't hesitate. He lifted her in his arms and carried her forward. His skin blistered, his breathing heavy, but he never stopped. Through the broken windows, they could see the storm raging outside. Lightning split the sky in colors of green and purple. The academy dome shattered under the pressure of the magnetic waves. Students screamed for help. Machines sparked and failed. Chaos filled the air. When they finally reached the lower levels, Ethan placed Zira near the emergency airlock. "Stay here," he said. "I'll go help the others." "No." She grabbed his arm weakly. "You'll die out there." He shook his head. "If I don't go, they will." Before she could stop him, he ran back into the smoke. She watched in shock as the human she once called weak disappeared into the fire. Not for glory, not for pride, but because he refused to leave anyone behind. Minutes felt like hours. Zira could hear explosions and cries echoing through the halls. She pressed her hands together, praying silently for the first time in her life, not to her gods, but for one human boy. Then through the haze, she saw him again, Ethan stumbling, carrying another student over his shoulder. His uniform was burned, his arms shaking, but his eyes still burned with determination. He dropped beside her, gasping. "That's everyone," he whispered. Zira caught him as he fell to his knees, coughing hard. "Why would you do this?" she cried. "You could have saved yourself." He smiled faintly, his voice barely a whisper. "On Earth, we don't leave people behind." Then his eyes slowly closed as rescue drones finally arrived. Zira held his head in her arms, tears falling from her silver eyes. For the first time, she didn't see a primitive human. She saw a hero. The academy was silent after the storm. The once bright halls of Verelion Prime were now dark and cracked. The students had been rescued, the fires put out, and the power slowly restored. But one student still lay motionless in the medical bay, Ethan Hale, the human boy who had risked his life to save everyone. Zira sat beside his bed, her silver hands trembling. She had not left his side since the rescue teams brought him in. The doctors said he had severe burns, his lungs damaged by smoke. They were not sure if his fragile human body could survive in alien medical care. She watched the machines beep softly, each sound echoing like a heartbeat in her chest. Ethan's face looked calm, peaceful even, though his skin was pale. He looked nothing like the strange boy she used to mock. Zira felt a deep ache inside her. She remembered his words. "On Earth, we don't leave people behind," she whispered softly. "You fool. You could have let me die." Days passed. Zira kept coming back, bringing water, adjusting the blankets, reading quietly beside him. The other students began talking about the human hero, but she didn't care about stories or fame. She just wanted him to open his eyes again. One morning, as the first rays of light touched the medbay window, she heard a faint sound, a soft cough. Zira jumped up and saw his eyes flutter open. "Ethan?" she breathed. He blinked slowly, his voice rough. "Zira, you're safe?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, because of you," he gave a weak smile. "Good. Then it was worth it." Zira almost shouted, "Worth it? You almost died." She turned away, wiping her tears. "Why do you always do this? Why do you keep trying to save everyone?" He took a slow breath. "Because someone once did the same for me." Zira turned back, confused. "What do you mean?" He stared at the ceiling, his voice quiet. "I was born on the Sol Outpost. It was one of the last human colonies after Earth started dying. We didn't have much, they'd no power, no real food. When I was little, a reactor exploded in the habitat. My father. He pulled me out, but he didn't make it." His eyes grew distant, filled with pain and memory. "He told me right before he died. Ethan, never leave anyone behind." "Not ever." Zira stood silent, her heart breaking with every word. Ethan smiled weakly. "So when I saw the fire, I just did what he would have done." For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of machines. Zira slowly reached for his hand. Her voice shook. "I mocked you. I laughed at you. And you still saved me." He looked at her gently. "You don't need to feel sorry, Zira. You didn't know me then." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "No, I didn't want to know you. I thought humans were weak, but you're stronger than all of us." Ethan gave a tired smile. "We're not strong because of power. We're strong because we have to be. We fall, we cry, we break one, but we get back up again." Zira held his hand tighter, her voice soft. "Then maybe that's what real strength is." He didn't answer. He had fallen asleep again, his breathing slow and steady. But the faint smile on his face remained. As she looked at him, Zira felt something new grow inside her. Respect, admiration, and a strange warmth she couldn't explain. Outside the medbay window, the storm clouds finally began to fade. The twin suns shone once more over Verelion Prime, and for the first time in her life, Zira saw their light differently, brighter, warmer, almost human. And deep inside, she made a promise to herself. She would learn about his people. She would know what it meant to be human. Days turned into weeks after the storm. The academy slowly healed. Walls repaired, students returned, and lessons began again. But for Zira, everything felt different now. She often found herself sitting beside Ethan during classes. He still looked weak, his arm bandaged, his breathing slow, but his spirit hadn't changed. He still smiled, still helped others, as if saving lives had left no scar on his heart. One afternoon, Zira decided to learn more about him. She walked into the academy archives, a massive room filled with glowing records from thousands of planets. She searched for Earth-human civilization. The results shocked her. Most of the files were locked under historic collapse. Only a few fragments were left. Old photos of blue oceans, green forests, and smiling faces under a bright sun. Zira stared at the screen in silence. "It was beautiful," she whispered. A voice behind her replied, "It was home." She turned and saw Ethan standing there, a soft smile on his face. "You shouldn't be walking," she said quickly. "You're still healing." "I'm fine," he said. "You're looking at Earth, right?" Zira nodded. "I wanted to understand. What you lost," he stepped closer, his eyes sad but calm. "We lost more than a planet. We lost the place that taught us who we were." He touched the screen gently where the image of Earth glowed. Blue, fragile, beautiful. "My ancestors used to call it the cradle of life. But we forgot how to take care of it. We fought each other, poisoned the air, and destroyed what kept us alive. By the time we realized it, it was too late." Zira listened quietly. His voice carried no anger, only sorrow and acceptance. He continued, "When the last storms came, my people built small outposts in space. Some survived, some didn't. My family lived in one of them, the Sol outpost. It wasn't much, just metal walls and recycled air. But to us, it was still Earth, just smaller." His eyes grew distant. Then one day, a system failure hit the colony. We lost power, heat, everything. My parents tried to keep me safe. My father went out to fix the main reactor, and he never came back. Zira's heart ached. "You were just a child," he nodded. 12 years old, she couldn't speak. The image of young Ethan, alone, scared, surrounded by darkness, made her chest tighten. He smiled faintly. "After that, I taught myself to fix things. To survive. I wanted to make sure no one else had to die like that. When the academy found me, they called me a primitive survivor. But I didn't care. I just wanted to learn. To rebuild what was lost." Zira's eyes filled with tears. "You've carried so much pain. And still, you never stopped smiling." He looked at her softly. "Pain doesn't have to destroy you. Sometimes it reminds you what matters." For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the quiet hum of data screens surrounded them. Zira stepped closer and said in a trembling voice, "I used to think humans were weak, but now I know. You're strong because you feel more than anyone else." Ethan smiled gently. "We feel a lot, yes. Maybe too much sometimes. But feelings are what kept us alive." Zira looked at the glowing Earth once more. "Your people may have lost their world," she said, "but they didn't lose their heart. Because it still lives in you." Ethan said nothing, but a tear glimmered in his eye. For the first time, Zira reached out and placed her hand over his. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "As long as I'm here, you'll never be." He looked at her, his voice soft and full of emotion. "Thank you, Zira." Outside the window, Verelion Prime's twin suns began to set, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The same colors, Zira thought, that once shone over Earth. And in that quiet moment, two souls, one alien, one human, stood side by side, bound by loss, courage, and something that neither technology nor time could erase: hope. Weeks passed after that evening in the archive room, and something inside Zira changed forever. She no longer looked at Ethan as a strange, fragile being from a lost world. She saw him as something else, a living memory of a planet that once taught love, hope, and courage to the stars. The academy soon returned to its normal rhythm. Students whispered about the human who had saved them during the storm. Some laughed, others showed respect. but all of them noticed the quiet bond that had formed between Ethan and Zyra. They walked together, studied together, and sometimes sat in silence under the shimmering skies of Virelian Prime. Two different souls sharing one quiet truth. One day, the Academy Council invited Ethan to speak at the Grand Forum, a place where young minds from across the galaxy gathered to share knowledge. The idea of a human speaking there shocked many. Some protested, saying, "What can a primitive species teach us?" But Zyra stood up in his defense. Her voice was steady and strong. "He can teach us what none of our data archives ever could, what it means to be truly alive." The hall fell silent. The council agreed. And so, the day arrived. The Grand Forum shimmered with thousands of students from hundreds of worlds. Different colors, shapes, and languages filled the air. Ethan stood on the great silver platform, his heart pounding. Zyra watched him from the front row, her hands clenched, eyes filled with pride. He took a deep breath and began. "My name is Ethan Miles. I come from a place called Earth." A murmur ran through the crowd. Ethan continued softly. "My people made mistakes. We hurt our planet, we lost it. But in that loss, we learned something. That strength doesn't come from power or weapons. It comes from the heart." He looked around the massive hall, his eyes shining with emotion. Humans were small compared to the universe. We had no claws, no wings, no telepathy. But we had something else, and the will to keep going. Even when everything was gone, we kept walking forward. We kept hoping. The hall grew quieter. Even the floating translators paused between words. Ethan's voice trembled slightly. "Maybe that's why I'm still here, and because my ancestors refused to give up. They passed that will to me, and I'm passing it to all of you. Don't let your technology make you forget what it means to care. Don't let your pride erase your compassion." Zyra felt tears slide down her cheeks. Around her, others were crying too. Beings of light, stone, and gas, all moved by a single human voice. Ethan finished softly. "We may have lost Earth, but Earth is not gone. It lives in us, in every act of kindness, in every dream to rebuild, in every friendship that crosses the stars." When he stepped back, the hall erupted in silence, not out of confusion, but reverence. Then slowly, one by one, they began to clap, their hands, wings, and claws echoing in unity. Zyra rushed to him after the speech and hugged him tightly. "You did it," she whispered, voice trembling. He smiled faintly. "No, Zyra, we did it. You helped me remember what I was fighting for." News of his speech spread across the galaxy. The Human Legacy Program was created, led by Zyra and Ethan together. They taught others about Earth, its beauty, its mistakes, its endless courage. Soon, beings from distant planets began to plant trees on barren moons, sing old Earth songs, and paint their skies blue in memory of the lost world. Ethan would often stand under the twin suns, smiling softly. Zyra would ask him, "Do you miss your home?" He would answer, "Sometimes, but I think Earth isn't just a place anymore. It's a feeling, one that lives wherever we remember it." And as the stars shone above them, Zyra finally understood what made humanity so special. It wasn't their strength, their weapons, or their intelligence. It was their heart, the quiet fire that refused to fade, even after their world had turned to dust. Humanity had fallen once. But through one boy and one alien girl, its spirit had risen again, not on Earth but among the stars. And this time, it would never be forgotten.